Welcome to episode 24 of VR Roundtable. My name is Anthony, and of course, I am joined by my partner in crime, Gary, coming to us live from the UK. But before we get to Gary, let's switch it over to Steve, who is finally returned from Maui. Steve, you don't look as dark as I was expecting you to look. What happened?
It's this light that I have shining on me in this dark room. I'm a little tan, more so than I would be in February in Kentucky. But no, it's very good to be back. It was a long time, and I was able to listen to the two shows. It was very different listening to the show when you're regularly on it and not being on it, and then hearing yourself referred to a couple times. And you guys referred to me through discussion and through me being on vacation. So it's good to be back, and to kind of tie it all in. I watched Arrival last night. I know you guys talked about it, so I'm kind of with Gary. I thought it was a good movie. It wasn't the greatest thing by any means, but I thought it was, an A- type movie. It was just good. It had a nice little twist, and the pacing was real well, even though it kind of built up to the big reveal. So, Anthony, I think you're in the minority here.
Although on the comments for the last video, I think most people are on Anthony's side. Actually, I think not many people seem to like it as much as we did.
Yeah, well, you had likened it to M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, and it has much that it has the whole double meaning. The arrival means two things.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question though? Like, you guys liked it. Who gave off a great performance in that movie? Like, which of the actors do you think gave a great performance? Because I didn't see one, man.
I'm not sure there was a great performance by an actor, but the whole thing kind of came together pretty neat. Like for me, I look at things as, okay, do I regret spending this time? Like, there's some people, and I think you may be in this camp, Anthony, you're kind of like waiting to be wowed. And then if it doesn't wow you, it's just kind of meh. Like, you kind of have that whereas for me, I kind of like, okay, it's good. It wasn't the best thing I'd ever seen, but it's good. I don't regret spending the 2 hours watching it or anything like that. And that's, it was a good 2 hours spent. That's the way I see it. So I thought it was okay.
So anyways, we should probably say, Gary, how's it going over there in the UK?
Yeah, same as always, really. Yeah, it's good over here. How's it over there in Sacramento?
It's going good. We're still watching our floodwaters.
Oh.
The Sacramento River is still incredibly high. We had a bunch of rain a few days back, and it's kind of stopped a little bit. So we're breathing a sigh of relief right now. But all throughout this spring is going to be a concern because I live close to the Sierra Nevadas, like Lake Tahoe and stuff like that. And the mountain ranges, you get tons of snow. And then what happens is when it starts to warm up, that snow starts melting. It all filters into our rivers. And sometimes our rivers can't really handle it. And so even though the rains might stop, we're not out of the woods, so to speak, until all that snow melts. And so it's going to be a situation all the way until like 4th of July, practically, that we're going to have to be concerned with this.
Yeah, that's not good, is it? I mean, over here in the UK, we've just had a bit of a storm only for a couple of days. It's probably nothing compared to the storms you get over there. But it caused a few problems over here. But the weather can cause a lot of problems, and especially if you got it in close proximity to any technology like your HTC Vive or anything like that, you need to keep that well away from these floodwaters.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, when you were in Maui, did you get like those flash rains and then 5 minutes later it's as sunny as could be, and then 10 minutes later it's raining? Was there anything like that?
It's kind of always that way in Maui. There wasn't a lot of storming and no flash rains, but the islands are formed by essentially a volcano, and the volcanoes are mountains, and they kind of create their own climate from the trade winds. And I'm not going to bore everybody with it on a VR podcast, but no, you get a little bit of rain every day, but for the most part, it's warm and sunny. They're kind of isolated from the weather patterns that you see on the mainlands.
All right, yeah, so let's go ahead and get into the news. We do have a couple late breaking news topics that just arrived today, actually. Well, I didn't notice them last night, anyways. The first one is we finally have official numbers from Sony as to how many PlayStation VR headsets have sold worldwide. And Andrew House was interviewed by New York Times Mobile, I believe. And basically, in the interview, he mentioned that they have now reached 915,000 PlayStation 4s that are sold through as of February 19th. And so this information has filtered out now. And so if you go to NeoGAF, there's a thread on it. If you go to the Vive subreddit, the Oculus subreddit, the PSVR subreddit, everybody's kind of talking about this because this is the first time we've gotten like real official numbers. And it's interesting to see the reaction of this because I was on NeoGAF and a few people were saying, yeah, this is the death of VR, man. Only 915,000 has been so long. What's the deal here? And then other people are like, oh, no, this is great. This is great news. And so I'll kick it over to Gary. Gary, what is your initial reaction when you see these numbers? Do you think this is a positive story, a negative story, or somewhere in between?
I think it's a positive story, to be honest, because these figures are coming about from even taking into account the fact that we know Sony have had a few problems with supplying PlayStation VR. It's not like there's been a lack of demand for it necessarily. People are struggling to get hold of these things from what I hear anyway. So I think it's when you've got close to 1 million out there, it's a good number, and it could have been a lot more if they didn't have these supply issues. And the other thing to remember as well, you know, they've spoke about this on sort of the Kind of Funny podcast, and when they've spoke to Shuhei Yoshida, they've spoken about how he is really treating this as the launch of a new console, like a first generation of a console, where it's going to be a slow build up to these kind of big figures, really. So you've got to take that into account. And also, I listened to a YouTube show by a guy called Epix 911, and he talks about these figures as well. And when he compares it to the original PlayStation that came out, you know, it took quite a few months for the original PlayStation to get to over 1 million. So it all bodes well, I think, and I take it as a very positive story overall.
Steve, what about you when you hear this official 915,000? What's your take?
It's more of a confirmation story, leaning positive. You know, for me, I think it confirms sort of what we were expecting, and I think it also confirms the supply shortage that they had. That company, Super Data or whatever it was, that said, I think their last one had put them at about 750,000. Well, if that's true, then that suggests that they've, you know, sold almost 200,000 units in the last, I don't know, 5-6 weeks or whenever Super Data put those last numbers out. And that is also timed somewhere around when supply started to trickle back in. So yeah, I think the numbers would have been higher if they didn't have supply chain issues, but it shows that it has some legs. It shows that, you know, compared to the Vive and the Oculus, that Sony is able to leverage their brand power and their console simplicity, along with it being a cheaper price point, and are already the market leader, setting Gear VR aside, of course. So I think it's good news. I think it confirms what we expected, and I think the bigger story will be what numbers this thing is in I don't know, June, July, when supply is no longer the bottleneck.
Yeah, one thing Andrew House mentioned in the article was that the supply issues he feels are going to be solved basically by April, which lets us know that the supply issues have not been solved up to this point. Here in the USA, people still struggle to find this thing on a regular basis where they can just drive to a store and pick it up. Now, it shows up every once in a while, but it's kind of a wild goose chase type thing. But then if you look at some people that are in Germany or Brussels or something like that, you'll see these stories where someone will take a picture of like 30 different PlayStation VRs stacked up, and they're like, hey, they're here. You know, why is nobody buying them? Like, I saw a photo from Germany that was like that. And so it just seems like where they chose to ship the units and, you know, all that type of thing, but eventually it'll get squared away. When I look at the 915,000, it almost seems disappointing to me. It's like, really, that's it? But then when you know about all the shortages and just people not being able to get this thing, it's kind of a non-story to me. But another late breaking story that we got, and this was just this morning as far as I'm aware, Farpoint for PlayStation VR has an official release date, May 16th, 2017. One of the things I was wondering about Farpoint is Sony going to hold this game back so that at E3 they can show Farpoint at E3 and have demos of Farpoint, blah, 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 blah. They haven't done this, and that's a great sign because that tells me they have to have some other stuff. If they were really low on the stuff that they could talk about, I think they would have held Farpoint back and have it as an unreleased game and then bring it out mid-June or July or something like that. So I think it's kind of good news. Steve, as a PlayStation VR owner, what's your feelings on May 16th Farpoint?
I'd like to play it sooner. That's my initial feelings. I wasn't very big on the game initially, and then I started to see more and more on it, and now I'm my interest is a lot higher. So yeah, it's good that they got a date, and it's good that that date isn't September or something, which I don't think anyone was speculating that it would be that late, but it was also always a possibility because Sony had been so kind of tight-lipped about its release date. So also, like you mentioned in relating it to E3, I'm curious if this now means that they have a nice announcement that they plan on making at E3. Like, okay, our big games really, throughout this whole library was Resident Evil 7 and Farpoint. That's kind of the two, at least from my perspective, the two that I thought were the big games. And now, Resident Evil 7's come and is behind us, and Farpoint has a date. That opens them up to make a big announcement at E3. If they don't do it here next week at GDC, I don't think people are expecting an announcement there. So it's great. It's got a date. We know when to play it. We know when to plan for it.
Alrighty, and Gary, you've got our next news story. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so this one was something that came out a few days ago about Steam Audio that was announced because Valve purchased a company called Impulse Sonic in January, and they promised this sort of technology which would allow better audio, spatial audio within virtual reality. So this was something that was announced, and Valve are now using this Impulse Sonic technology to release Steam Audio, part of the SDK. So it's now I've got just a quick comment from the Steam Audio page, so I'll just read this out. It says, reflections and reverb can add a lot to spatial audio. Steam Audio uses the actual scene geometry to simulate reverb. This lets users sense the scene around them through subtle sound cues, an important addition to VR audio. This physics-based reverb can handle many important scenarios that don't easily fit within a simple box model. So it sounds like it's going to add a lot. I mean, if they're announcing this specifically, hopefully it will be some kind of difference, because everybody, I mean, well, I don't want to say everybody, but me personally, I don't take too much notice of the audio within VR, and it's something that I really should, because when I do notice some piece of audio within a game or experience that does stand out to me, it really stands out to me. So maybe that's sort of the missing piece from a lot of these experiences. So I'd be interested to hear how this affects things within virtual reality. But I don't know if any of you guys, Steve, did you see this story at all?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't know how to comment on it too much, other than, okay, it's great that they're continuing to kind of evolve in that space. Like you, I don't always notice the audio, but I think that's a good thing, because I think it just works. So like, I'm not sure that the 3D audio is where we have a lot of room to improve upon. You know, it feels like, you know, there's so many other milestones that we need to get to first, just in general. But the audio is a key piece, and there are games that I'll occasionally notice it where I'll get a cue from my, you know, left, you know, kind of 100 and, I don't know, 50 degrees from the left behind me type direction. And, you know, sure enough, there's a zombie there or whatever, and say Arizona Sunshine. And, you know, if that can be better, I'm having difficulties imagining how it can be much better. But that being said, you know, years ago, I used to work in audio sales. I worked for a retailer, kind of like a high-end Best Buy or something. And I was able to go out to Kansas, where a company called Martin Logan that makes these electrostatic speakers, and they're not a typical driver that you would normally see. And went to the owner of the company's house, and he had, you know, like $80,000 retail cost of speakers that he demoed for us. And what I learned there, and that's why I'm telling this long story, is that when you hear perfectly mapped audio for the first time, you then see like, oh, holy shit, like I didn't ever realize it could be this way. And that's what I remember. And this was probably in the year 2001 that I went. So it's 15, 16 years ago. And I still remember that day very vividly. And if Valve can kind of leverage some of that technology and be better with the 3D mapping, I think we'll all realize it, even though it may be hard to visualize right now what it would be like.
Yeah, that's my thinking as well. You know, until we try it, it might be this big difference that we just can't imagine at this stage. But Anthony, what did you think about all this?
Well, my question is, when do we get to hear this? Okay, so like I heard somebody in one thread was talking about Onward, and that Onward had an update and the sound quality improved like by leaps and bounds. And so some people are wondering, oh, have they added this to Onward? Is that why the sound is like way the hell better? And then the other question I have is, okay, so Valve is the one that's talking about this. So I should be able to go into the lab and Zortex 26XX and it should sound way the hell better, right? Or Longbow or any of the other experiences in the lab. But I don't know that I've heard anybody raving about any of this stuff. So that's kind of my question. When will we actually hear this?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I think it did mention that it's the additions to the SDK are being implemented very soon. So I don't know if it's actually been implemented in some games or experiences already. I'm not too sure about that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear it anyway.
Okay, Steve, you have our next story.
It was our next one's the news on that Microsoft is going to skip kind of their internal Rev 2 and move on to their Rev 3 of the HoloLens. And, you know, I think I'm the only one of us three that have tried the HoloLens, and I'm not very experienced with it. I tried it for maybe 10 minutes. So I'm not sure how big of a story this is, but you know, I think it makes sense. I think they're behind. They you know, in the VR AR space to a degree, you know, they kind of went this direction, you know, when this is how I recall it, at least, you know, when the Vive and the Oculus was gaining a lot of traction and up until, you know, they were released, you know, Microsoft, not too dissimilar from Apple, were kind of making comments saying, well, we think, you know, AR is really important too. And they kind of hedged their bets that way. And that's fine. But the HoloLens itself, I have issues seeing where it's going to be as a product. I understand augmented reality, and I understand the pros that it has, you know, in comparison to virtual reality, but I don't know where this product fits, you know, with its integrated processing. Again, I get the benefits of having integrated processing and not having to rely on an outboard PC, but I don't know who needs this and who uses this and really where this is going to be. So by them skipping out on a second version, which sounds like it was a minor rev internally to them, and going into, you know, what they call their third rev, which is more of a generational leap, I think it's good. I only hope that we get to see it a little bit before 2019. You know, they don't have to necessarily have it commercialized and, you know, consumerized, if that's a word, by then, but at least kind of tell us some information, tell us what's going to make this thing special, tell us, you know, where it's going to fit in the consumer space, tell me why I should care about a HoloLens. And they surely haven't convinced me to date why a HoloLens is important.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like they're hoping to expand the field of view, and it's going to take them longer to, it's more of a longer term thing for them to expand the field of view and make it a little bit better for the widespread acceptance of it. So I don't mind. I think it makes sense. I mean, HoloLens, the developer version is $3,000, and that's not a consumer product really. So it's going to take some time. So I think it makes sense. Also, they're not backed into any kind of corner by Magic Leap, because Magic Leap still hasn't shown anything really. So it's not like they're being pressured by any other particular company. So they got time to wait.
Yeah, I was thinking this as well, because I mean, the one thing that people were mentioning about the HoloLens, everybody mentions the fact that the field of view is too small. So you would imagine that by 2019 they're developing the technology. I guess a lot of it comes down to processing power that they can get on board with this thing. So by that time, maybe the processing power is effective enough to allow for a wider field of view. But with your point of the Magic Leap comparison as well, you know, I feel like Microsoft are sort of moving towards AR, but they've also got these compatible for Windows holographic. They've got these that they're using third-party people to basically make some VR headsets that will work with Windows holographic. But again, it's sort of half steps. They're sort of half steps within that direction. HoloLens, I'm not suggesting HoloLens is a half step. I think it's some fantastic technology, but it feels like they do need to push it a little bit further if they're going to keep up with Magic Leap. And like you say, Anthony, they're probably not really being pushed in that direction too much at the moment, because Magic Leap still haven't got a viable product out there at the moment. And it might be the case that Magic Leap brings something out in 2019 and Microsoft will coincide that with their own sort of updated HoloLens to compete with that.
Do either of you guys get the sense that it is a product that is intended to kind of compete or be their counterpart with Magic Leap or even the Vive and PSVR? I know it's an AR product instead of a VR product, but to me, I almost am curious if it's not more like a souped up Google Glass. I don't know if you guys remember that. I think it was called Google Glass. It was the eyeglasses that Google came out with. And I thought that was a very neat concept, and they kind of died off and never went anywhere. You don't even hear about it anymore. And I see HoloLens as being more of a higher end Google Glass than a kind of a consumer entertainment product. You know, I could see myself wearing a HoloLens, driving in the car and having like a, you know, the idea like the old in the 80s, they used to have the heads up displays in the car that would project out onto the windshield. Like having something like that, like I could see it having a lot of utility, but I don't necessarily see it as a consumer entertainment device. I don't know if you guys, am I just visioning this, or do you guys kind of see it the same way?
No, I agree as well. It seems like, yeah, I take your point actually. Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're trying to compete in that area with the HoloLens at all. Really, they're not marketing it or even putting it towards developers in that way. They're sort of marketing. It's almost like they're talking about HoloLens as if it's just something that will be used for industry. So they're aiming it primarily towards the industry market and for design and these kinds of applications. But yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up there.
I think it's purely based on price. $3,000. Who can they sell a $3,000 headset to? Not Joe Walmart. He ain't gonna buy it. So they got to sell it to Joe Corporate. But basically, I mean, that's kind of the deal for them with HoloLens. Is I think it will be a major entertainment device. I remember that one time they showed demonstrations of it where it was like football players in your living room, and they showed demonstrations of like these robots coming out of the wall and zapping little things. And it's going to be a consumer entertainment device, but until the price is within range, they can't go down that road. But Gary, I believe you have our next topic, the Zenimax. There's an update on that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, this was just there's not a lot of information from this that I can find actually, but yeah, Zenimax have now filed an injunction against Oculus, which basically prevents. Well, they're attempting to prevent Oculus from using certain parts of the code within the Oculus SDK, which they allege was stolen from them. So if that's the case, then apparently that could prevent a certain number of games, Oculus games, from working with the headset, which will be, I mean, it'll be an awful thing if that turned out to be the case. But Oculus did respond. I've just got a quote here from Oculus. They responded, they said, Zenimax's motion does not change the fact that the verdict was legally flawed and factually unwarranted. We look forward to filing our own motion to set aside the jury's verdict and, if necessary, filing an appeal that will allow us to put this litigation behind us. So, you know, nothing's set in stone. It probably won't even come to the point where they have to abide by this injunction or anything like that. And I hope they don't. You know, one thing I wanted to ask both of you actually is, do you think Zenimax are going too far with this? You know, they seem to be going full on to attack Oculus and to really get whatever they can out of this, even if it could potentially make them look bad in the long run. You know, nobody wants VR to disappear, and this is really attacking the consumers as much as Oculus. But Anthony, what did you think about this?
One thing I heard, first of all, I don't think this injunction is going to go through. Because number one, Facebook, they got all the money in the world and they got some great lawyers. They're going to figure out ways to try to make this not happen. But if somehow this did actually happen, I was reading into it a little bit, and the way I understand it is there's a lot of Gear VR software that has already been released and has been available for like over a year. And that a lot of these programs would immediately have to come off the store because they use just a tiny little bit of code that has something to do with the whole Zenimax thing from, you know, back before. And so the theory with this is that the odds of the court actually going with Zenimax and actually doing the whole injunction is slim, but there's still enough of a chance there. And this would be such a public relations nightmare to have to take all these Gear VR games off the store. I heard it's more Gear VR than actually Oculus. And Oculus has they have a partnership with Samsung. This would be a major problem, you know, if this happens. Samsung is like, we ain't got nothing to do with this. And now all these games are going to get kicked off the Gear VR store. So it kind of might be a scare tactic where they're trying to panic Oculus a little bit more from that Samsung Gear VR side of the coin. And I mean, I haven't read a ton about it. I could kind of be talking out of my, you know what, a little bit with this, but that's what I kind of read about it. And it was like, oh man, all those Gear VR games. I never even thought about that part of it.
Yeah, and you know, somebody was talking about this, how they were saying that this could just be sort of a threat to stop Oculus from trying to combat the sort of appeal, the ruling that they've got to pay all this money to them. But Steve, what did you think?
Well, there's a saying that I keep hearing recently, and I don't know why. I'm picking it up from somewhere, but it's you know, play chess, not checkers. And I think it's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a game of checkers because we only see one move, and that's whatever's been recently published or recently put out in the you know, the internet space. I have no clue what the end game and what the people at Zenimax and their legal team and what the people at Facebook/Oculus and their legal team is. I don't know. This has gotten to a point where it doesn't make any sense to me anymore. Like, why in the hell does Zenimax want to do this? What do they gain to benefit? Like, if they're pushing to have some sort of like royalty or licensing cost, okay, then make that the thing where you want a 10-cent slice of every game sold or whatever. but to try to kill a market that you also have a vested interest in makes. So there has to be, and I'm sure that they're relatively smart people that are kind of leading this direction. So I have to assume there's an end game that I just can't see. But for now, I'm like, WTF.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm thinking is maybe this points to something that Zenimax knows that we don't. You know, maybe they are going to bring out their own VR headset. They've been working behind the scenes this whole time, because this doesn't make sense. You're right, Steve. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier and just thinking the only way they could benefit from all this, really, apart from I mean, that they're not really gaining any money by attacking Oculus to this level anymore. They've already sort of won the trial and are getting this money, but by then going after them this hard, it makes you think maybe they're just trying to ruin Oculus and then bring out their own headset or something like this. I mean, I know that's probably not the case, but it just makes you think, why else would they be doing this kind of stuff?
If you go back to the history of ZeniMax before they ever like bought Bethesda and all of that stuff, the history of ZeniMax, like the people that are on the board, they're all like attorneys. They sue everybody for everything. That's like I mean, that's their history. Like a lot of the people that are on the ZeniMax board, they're all like big time lawyers and a lot of litigation. And so they're going to take this thing. I mean, they're all in on this. They were all in by going to a jury trial. They have to be spending a lot of money to do this whole thing. So it's kind of like they're pot committed. They're already in. So they're just going to push this thing as far as they can. It's probably not going to work out for them, but they're kind of like going no holds barred, basically. Okay. Another story I have is, so Sony has a special department that was in charge of the headset. It's called PlayStation Magic Labs. And apparently at GDC, PlayStation Magic Labs is going to be showing off some new technology that has to do with human characters in VR and basically being in the same place as other human characters, and how they react to you, how they look at you, how they react to noises that are in the same environment or motion that is going on within this shared environment with you and this other digital character. And apparently it's pretty impressive. And I guess they have these demos that they're going to show where they can turn on this ability for the characters to be more aware, and then they can turn it off. So they can kind of show you like a before and after. We all know about like PlayStation VR Worlds, you know, where you have the guy with the cigar and everything, and you're interacting with these human characters that are right in front of you. And that's what they're trying to improve on. They're trying to make it better and better. I remember talking back about like Resident Evil 7 and that one cop and how he's right there and he's talking to me, and it just seems so incredibly real. It was like one of those moments where it's like, oh my God, this is really the future, these human characters interacting with you. And if they can make that even better, that's going to be incredible. So I'm definitely looking forward to hear more about what happens at GDC in regards to this technology. Did any of you guys look at this one at all?
Yeah, I did. I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate. We've talked about, you and I, Anthony, on the show, that we feel that for whatever reason, Sony seemed to do a better job with their software in terms of putting fully fledged characters in front of you. You know, Resident Evil 7, Batman, you know, the London Heist. There are a lot of games where they put real people in front of you, and you know, I don't know why you don't see that a lot on the Vive now. So my point is we see the value in that, and we've commented on it. It's a very important thing. Now the devil's advocate in me though says, hold on, the PlayStation console and including the PS4 Pro is sort of CPU limited. Well, I mean, compared to a modern PC, it's CPU and GPU limited, but more so CPU limited. as I understand it. So if you're talking about technology, and this may be technology they don't really plan on implementing until PS5 or something, but for now, if we're going to say that this is possible technology that we're going to see on the current console and the current PlayStation VR, then I almost wonder at what fidelity. Like, I'm not sure I want a more lifelike human character if it comes at the cost of visual fidelity. And I'm not saying that's the case. I don't know. I'm not programming any of this technology or these games, but I'm just very skeptical, I guess, and even a little bit cynical of an idea that we can load this limited hardware even further.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I'm not a programmer either, so I don't know if this kind of thing will add any sort of load onto the CPU or anything like that that will necessarily impact it in a way that you'll notice, but hopefully it wouldn't. And it's interesting, one thing when I was reading this story about this, what PlayStation are going to show at GDC, one thing that came to me, and it's a game that I've not really thought too much about since I first played it, called Abbott's Book, on the HTC Vive. It's just a demo at the moment, but it's a free download. Now, in that game, there's a character who sort of guides you through the first part of this game, and he's a sort of semi-realistic kind of character in front of you, and as you move around your play space, his eyes will actually follow you. And what PlayStation are talking about within this is sort of that taken to the nth degree, because it's not just the fact that their eyes are following you or anything like this. It's the fact that they're interacting with you in a more realistic way, interacting with things that happen within the environment where you're supposed to be virtually. But just going back to this Abbott's Book, it was quite a good experience, and that was something that really stuck out to me, this character. And you're right, Steve, you don't see this a lot on the HTC Vive, where you have these realistic character models, and part of that I think comes from the fact that a lot of the games are indie developed, and creating realistic character models is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially to animate them realistically as well. So we tend to rely more on the bigger studios to do this kind of stuff. But yeah, I'd like to see what they're talking about, because it seems quite vague what was in this article. So it'd be good to get some more information about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how extra taxing it would be if you're in when you're programming a video game, and I've been a long-term programmer, so I'm speaking from experience here. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know anything about this stuff, but I would imagine that when you have other characters that are interacting with each other, let's just pretend they're all game AI characters. They have to be aware of the other characters that are in their space, and they write code where the character knows, okay, there's another character 5 feet over here. Be aware of it. Be aware of, like, if this character throws a grenade, you take off running, the awareness that goes with that. And I think if you have somebody in a headset, and maybe with 2 Move controllers, or maybe just a DualShock 4, how hard is it to just add that headset information and say, look, this is the head of another character that could just be an AI character, but it's actually a real human. But to be aware, okay, if this character takes out a grenade and throws it, you take off running. I don't know that that would be incredibly hard to program all of that. I don't know that that adds an extra load. And like Gary was saying, we don't see this a lot. But if you look at a simple game like, what's the Carnival games, Carnival, whichever one that was by 2K Games, they have characters in there that will look at your head, and they look at you. They kind of follow you around, and they're simple cartoon characters, but I think that adds quite a bit of extra juice to the overall situation. So I don't think it's going to be that incredibly difficult, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it's good that they're working on stuff like this, because I think that's really what's going to help the killer app part of this thing, is where you really have characters that really react to you in the same world as you. Okay, one of the last stories that we have is the story on the Oculus engineers and Jason Rubin at DICE. Gary, do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, I did see this. It was the fact that he was Jason Rubin was talking about how when he was playing some multiplayer Dead and Buried, how he was talking about how when he was hearing these other players that were involved in the match, he knew that they were HTC Vive users rather than Oculus Rift users based on the sound of their mics and just some distortion that was going through because it was being processed through the Oculus SDK. It created some distortion through the HTC Vive mic. And he was said during this that they were working at Oculus to sort this problem out. So it was just an acknowledgement that, first of all, that Revive exists in the first place, which, I mean, I know they've acknowledged that in the past. They refer to it in generic terms, but they were talking about it in the sense that they were hoping to sort of rewrite parts of the Oculus SDK in order to eliminate these problems for HTC Vive owners using the Revive. So it was just an interesting little comment that he made about this, because it's basically, the headline was they were trying to make more Oculus games work well with Revive for HTC Vive users. That's not really exactly what he was saying, but it's more or less there. They were trying to improve the mic quality so it didn't get all these distortions. So it was just an interesting comment. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see this one as well?
Yep. And earlier I had the WTF moment, and it's kind of, you know, the inverse of that here. You know, finally Oculus is saying, hey, hold on. We make a lot of money off of software. Hardware is great, and you got to have hardware because you want to kind of lock people into your market. I was like, but if we can sell outside of that locked in market, that's still a good profit margin, because, you know, I have to assume the biggest profit comes from software, because that's just kind of how this stuff has worked for a while. So I think this is the right direction. And I think, you know, the only thing they've done wrong here is not make this decision 6 months sooner. You know, that's the way I see it. Like, and as I understand it, Valve doesn't lock anything out. They kind of believe in things, or Steam, I should say, Steam VR doesn't, or the HTC Vive itself. There's nothing that says that, again, as far as I understand it, there's nothing that says that the Vive couldn't just work with the within Oculus itself. Maybe there is, you know, and I don't know if it's due to the lighthouses and some technology there, but you can run apps outside of Steam VR, or I guess it's not outside of Steam VR, it's outside of Steam itself, and it'll open Steam VR. And I'm not sure Valve would close the doors for Oculus to run Steam VR in the same or a similar way that like you know, maybe you'd get something off a Viveport, or some of those few titles. I haven't done it in months, so I can't remember a title, but you can, there's websites where you can actually download some trials and demos and things like that and completely run them outside of Steam, and they'll open Steam VR. Well, I take that back. The Iris VR thing that I made, like, that launches outside of Steam, and then it opens Steam VR, and it goes from there. So I don't see why, if Oculus really wants to go this direction and make their software more compatible with the Vive and tap into that ability to get some additional sales, why don't they just go that way? I don't know if they're worried about a branding thing, of it saying Steam or something when, you know, Steam VR when you launch a game.
Yeah, I think this is a complicated issue, because what Oculus have said through the beginning, this goes all the way through to this kind of exclusivity as well and all this kind of stuff. But what it is, Oculus say that if they will allow the Vive to work with their SDK, but they want it to run the Oculus SDK. They don't want it to run, because they're of the opinion that their Oculus SDK is the best software out there for VR, and they don't want to sort of water down that experience by making
Zenimax feels the same way, I guess.
yeah. But now that's their excuse. They're saying, but they won't. I don't know what the holdup is in terms of, like, whether it's HTC, whether it's Valve saying that they won't allow it to run natively Oculus SDK, or if it's just not compatible with that natively for some reason. And this is the holdup. It's not that, I mean, my own opinion of this is from what I've read, is it's not necessarily Oculus saying we're not going to allow the Vive to work natively with us, but they've got to allow us they've got to allow their own hardware to work natively with our SDK, and this is the holdup. Okay, now I hope people will put in the comments actually to clarify some of this that we're talking about here, because I'd love to hear a very, very clear and detailed view of why this isn't possible at the moment. But anyway, Anthony, what did you think of this one?
Oh,
you've gone. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. The only thing I'll say on this is that part of their motivation for this may have nothing to do with HTC Vive owners and with Revive. Part of their motivation is that if you're going to have these Vive players that are going to be playing with Oculus players, and the headset or the mic sound is all messed up, you're affecting the enjoyment of these Oculus users. And so they have to look out for their Oculus users, their native Oculus users. And so what they're probably looking at is like, okay, what can we do so that the mics sound okay? And so when they're playing with Oculus users, you don't hear this crappy mic, because then it's going to be a situation where like, oh man, we got a bunch of Vive users in this game and it's ruining the sound and all that. So they could be more motivated just from the fact of, we want to make this situation good for Oculus users, not so much for the Vive people, but it does have the side benefit of hopefully helping some of these Revive compatibility issues. That's kind of my take. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much the stories we got this week. One topic I wanted to get into, and this is a little bit off the beaten trail from a VR standpoint, but I listen to a ton of podcasts every week, and the vast majority of podcasts that I listen to are not VR. They might have a little VR segment, or every once in a while they might bring up VR here or there. But I listen to Giant Bomb. I listen to like the Kind of Funny Games Cast, PS I Love You, XOXO, Player One podcast, stuff like that. And they'll every once in a blue moon mention VR, but it's not really a VR related podcast. But one of the things that I've been hearing in every single one of these podcasts is everybody just tripping over themselves to rant and rave about Horizon Zero Dawn, which is this big PlayStation 4 exclusive that is about to come out. Well, it's going to be out tomorrow, I guess, by the time we post this, and or within a couple of days of when we post this. And one thing I'll mention is that before I ever got interested in VR, I was into all these games. And Horizon Zero Dawn, I remember the first time I saw that at E3, and I was like, oh my God, this looks so cool. Look at these robot dinosaurs. Look at this world. I was kind of worried about Guerrilla Games, because I was like, can they really do this? Can they pull this off? Because, I mean, Killzone's okay, but this is a much bigger effort by them. And but I forgot about Zero Dawn because I got into VR, and I don't care about flat games really. I ignore them for the most part. But hearing every single website, every single reviewer just rant and rave about Horizon Zero Dawn, it has me kind of wanting to play this game on Tuesday or whenever it comes out. And so I'll kick it over to Steve, and Gary, of course, you can come in on this as well. But Steve, have you been hearing all this Horizon Zero Dawn stuff? And basically, what is your feeling on like playing VR games, but going back to a flat game, going back to VR? You know what? I mean, how would you explain this whole thing?
So I certainly haven't tried to keep it a secret or anything, but I have issues playing flat games. You know, it's not an absolute thing, and I know I'm in some sort of ultra VR enthusiast kind of niche segment, because you know when I read GAF, there are a lot of people that seem to be able to go back and forth, and they're very much interested in playing the latest and greatest, of which Horizon Zero Dawn seems to be that. For me, I did go back and play Final Fantasy 15. And I kind of burned through it really quickly during the sort of the holidays after it had come out, and my son had watched me play it a little bit, and you know I really just kind of stuck to the main objectives. You know, it's a very open world game, so I struggle with it, honestly, because I'm very interested in Horizon Zero Dawn, but I find myself that I'll probably like be feeling like it's empty. I was reading on a message board not too long ago, and someone described it as not the game specifically, but traditional, you know, flat gaming as like looking through a window. You know, like it's like looking through a window in the side of a house or something, side of a building, and on the inside of that building is the world of, say, Horizon Zero Dawn or Final Fantasy 15 or whatever. And I think that was a very good analogy, because I feel that way. Like I feel like now, after spending so much time in VR, that no matter how good a game is, it's missing this feeling. It's you know, it's hard to describe. It's also why I don't think I'm much of, like, say, a retro gamer. Like I remember loving, you know, original Mario and, you know, all those games, but I don't ever go back and play them. You know, I'm intrigued by the NES Classic thing that's hard to get, but I don't think I'll be able to go back, honestly. I guess it's my point. I'm rambling, but I don't think I'll be able to go back and enjoy Horizon Zero Dawn. Because I didn't really enjoy Final Fantasy 15 that much. Not that it was a bad game. It's just because it was missing that draw that I feel I need now in my gaming entertainment.
Yeah, I think I feel very similar way to you, Steve. It's difficult, and I posted a video a couple of days ago on our channel about has VR ruined monitor gaming, which, I mean, I mentioned in that video, it's not ruined it, because it's not going to sort of take away from what monitor gaming is. But the problem is, when I look back on the past year of owning VR, I've barely played any monitor games. Now, just getting back to Horizon Zero Dawn, you're right, Anthony, there's a lot of people talking about this game, and it does sound really, really good. And I'm tempted by it. I've got to say, I am tempted to go for it. I don't think I'll be picking it up straight away, but I may pick it up a couple of months down the line when it's in a sale or something like that, because it's one of these games, you know, I like these kinds of games, and I'd be interested to try it. But like Steve says, with these, what we call them flat games now, they're just missing a certain something, which I wish they didn't. You know, I don't want to say this. I don't want to say that monitor games are not the same for me anymore. But really, when I have to say these kind of things, I've got to pin it down to the fact that it's not the same for me. It's just not. So it gets to the point where, before I had VR, I was of the opinion that, you know, you could play a little bit of VR and then go back and play some monitor games, because they've got different things about them, and that's okay. And it's not that all games can be translated to VR perfectly or anything like that. So maybe there's certain types of games that do work better on a monitor, but overall, pretty much all of the games that I can think of offhand would be better within VR, and that's just the way I feel. And you know, I don't want it, because people can get annoyed at saying that once you've tried VR, you don't want to go back and play monitor games. But I don't have any other way of explaining how it's been this past year. I just can't get back into monitor games at the moment.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if it's really a bias situation, because, I mean, we're in a unique situation. We do a VR podcast once a week. Okay, we do VR Let's Plays. We have other videos on our channel where we're talking about various VR topics. And so we're really dialed into the VR thing. I mean, every single day we look at VR news stories on Reddit and Upload VR and Road to VR. And we're 100% dialed in on this VR thing. So we have an incentive, in a way, to negate everything else and be 100% VR. If I pick up Horizon Zero Dawn, which is like a 50-hour game, and I start playing the hell out of Horizon Zero Dawn, then that's time that I'm not playing VR games. And there's only so many hours in the day. You know, I got a full-time job. I got a wife. I got kids. There's only so many waking hours of free time that you have to spend on something. And so if you're pouring that into a Dark Souls game or a Horizon Zero Dawn or Final Fantasy 15 or whatever that game happens to be, then that's time that you're not using on VR. So I kind of wonder if part of it is just almost this built-in bias where we almost don't want, well, I can only speak for myself, but I wonder, like, subconsciously, if I almost don't want any of these flat games to really grab me again, because if they do grab me, oh no, what does that mean? I spent all this money on this HTC Vive. I spent all this money on PlayStation VR. If Horizon Zero Dawn really grabs me, then I look over at those headsets and I'm like, well, why did I spend all this money on this if I can enjoy flat gaming as well? So it's a really interesting question. One thing I will say is next week, I'm going to try to get my hands on Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, I'm not going to run out and buy it for $65 or whatever, but I will try to rent it from Redbox. And part of the reason I want to grab it is I got a PlayStation 4 Pro. Steve, you're in this situation. You recently got a PlayStation 4 Pro when that came out. And Horizon Zero Dawn, if you take away the VR part of PlayStation 4 Pro, Horizon Zero Dawn is like the poster child for PlayStation Pro, and seeing it on a 4K TV and seeing all the beautiful graphics that they put into it, I just want to check that out and see it. But the last time I tried flat gaming was actually when I did get my PlayStation 4 Pro, and I borrowed this guy's Ratchet and Clank because I heard that was incredible in 4K. I went and rented the brand new Call of Duty, Infinite Warfare, whichever the last Call of Duty was. I rented that because supposedly that took advantage of PlayStation 4 Pro. And I tried to play him, and I played him for a little while, and I was like, yeah, this kind of looks good, but no, I'm going back into my VR headset because I want to be freaking completely immersed in a world and have it surround me. So it's going to be an interesting question, but kicking it back to Steve, do you wonder if there is some built-in bias? Like, are you convincing yourself that VR is the way to go, or you've tried these flat games and it just isn't resonating with you?
No, I don't think there's a built-in bias. You know, there could be, but consciously, I'm not aware of it. You know, again, I did Final Fantasy 15, and the entire time, it wasn't like, oh, you know, I'm looking over at my PlayStation VR and going, man, blah, blah, blah. It was really like, this would be cool in VR. Like, this would be cool if I didn't have to, you know, like just stare in this one direction. This would be cool if it, you know, entertained my whole periphery. So I really don't think it's a bias thing. And I think you'll see that when you give Horizon Zero Dawn a go. Like, as great as a game as it probably is, you'll still be missing that little secret sauce, you know, that you've now grown accustomed to. You know, that said, more on Horizon Zero Dawn specifically, around the holidays, we picked up a 4K TV, a cheaper one that was on sale, to replace a TV that's kind of in this side room, that we really only entertain in from time to time. And I'm like, I had issues buying a 1080p TV. You know, this was a Black Friday type thing, and it was like $50 more. I'm like, yeah, I'm going 4K just because. And when I hung the TV on the wall, I wanted to see some games in 4K. And I know it's not the same as playing the game, but you can go to YouTube and they have some pretty, you know, 4K 60 frames per second. I think it's 60 frames per second, but they have 4K, and I did check out some of the stream, the raw captures of Horizon Zero Dawn that was available, and even via YouTube, it looked, on this 4K TV, it looked incredible. And that will stand out because you're seeing the polar opposite in VR. Like, things are just struggling to get by with the lens technology and the, you know, the effective DPI of these screens that are in these headsets. So that will stand out, and I can only imagine it'll look better than the YouTube cut that I was looking at. But it still looked really, really good, and I imagine that'll impress you. But the lack of spatialness will immediately be present as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a bias as well, because I've tried playing some flat games in the past year. You know, I've tried to get into them, and I just find myself not really being able to the way I was before. But at the same time, having said that, you've got to be aware of the fact as well that, because I listen to a lot of podcasts like you, Anthony, and it doesn't seem to be the case. It's not like our opinion of VR seems to be the standard opinion, because a lot of these people like Giant Bomb and, you know, the Kind of Funny guys, they all sort of using VR, but it's not their main focus. Their main focus is still flat games, and they seem to be very content to continue down that path with these flat games, and VR just being something on the side that they can sort of dip into every now and again. So I'm not saying that my opinion is the standard opinion or even the most popular opinion. It's just the opinion I have. And maybe you've just got to be a certain type of person to really become enthusiastic about VR at this stage. It's just got to click with you, I think, at the moment.
Hey, Gary, I actually want to ask you a question, because I know you do listen to a lot of podcasts similar to me, like Kind of Funny, Giant Bomb, Player One, stuff like that. And most of these podcasts, very little talk of VR happens. It's very little. But you listen to these. So when you listen to all these guys talking about Neo or Horizon Zero Dawn or Tom Clancy, whatever that new game is, Wildlands or whatever it is, all these different games that are coming out, that's mainly what they're focused in. And you listen to these podcasts with these people talking about that. What do you think in your mind? Like, do you even care about it, or you're just so used to listening to the podcast that you don't want to stop listening to them? Or, I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I guess there's a part of that in it. But I listen to them because I'm a fan of, it's not just gaming, I'm a fan of technology, and I like computer technology, console technology. I like all these latest sort of, it's related to gaming, of course, but I like all these latest innovations. And I think these podcasts just give you the latest news of these kinds of things. And also, you know, they do mention VR occasionally. You've got Ethan from the Player One podcast, and he's a VR enthusiast. So I like hearing when he has certain thoughts on VR. And also, a part of it as well, when they do mention VR, they're coming at it from a different point of view that I have. Like I say, they're more into their flat games, and VR is sort of a sideline at the moment. But it's interesting for me to hear their opinions on VR, because I think they're edging more towards the mainstream opinion of virtual reality at the moment. I know that we're enthusiasts and we're sort of the early adopters of virtual reality, and we love the technology. So I guess part of it is that I'm listening to these podcasts to get a more balanced view overall of what virtual reality is out there, the perception of it in the mainstream. And that's part of the reason. But, you know, I like games as well, so I just like hearing all the latest news about games anyway.
I listen to, well, you know, I don't know if I listen to quite as many as you guys, but I listen to the various IGN produced shows and PS I Love You, and I found that over the last, say, 4 months, I've started listening to them less. And it's because I'm becoming less and less interested in traditional gaming. And, you know, I almost hate to admit it, you know, because it's somehow like, you know, come across as just a rampant VR fanboy or something like that. But, you know, I'm getting less and less interested. And, you know, I'm going to have to find ways to get comfortable with that notion, and, you know, find myself that, you know, I think VR is where this industry is going. I'm hedging my bets, but it doesn't have to be a bet. You know, you don't have to think of it that way. I'm saying this is what's entertaining me now, and I feel like I've already gotten my money's worth. You know, I don't want this to be the end of it, but if my 2 headsets dissolved into thin air today, I would look back, I'd be upset, I'd grieve or whatever, you know, that I can't play them anymore. But at the same time, I would look back fondly and say, you know what, man, I had a lot of fun the last year or however long it's been. So, you know, I think you just got to accept it, and, you know, don't necessarily force yourself, you know, like, do what compels you, you know, like if you know, the wife and the kids go to some kid's birthday party and you're hanging out at the house by yourself for a couple hours on a Sunday, play what you're drawn to, And for me, it's naturally it's VR, and I don't think it's because, you know, I'm involved with the show, or, you know, I have all this money dumped into it. I think, you know, when I you know, I'm thinking, ooh, I want to play this game, you know, I want to play that game. It's VR games legitimately, especially Resident Evil 7. I was just completely taken over by that. And, you know, we mentioned it with Vertigo. Like, that game is a VR game. It hasn't sank its hooks into me. So I'm not convinced that this is some kind of subconscious thing that's driving us, or that we're somehow being, I don't know, untrue to our gamer selves or something. Like, I just think we are being, or at least myself, I'm doing what compels me in the moment. I'm playing what compels me in the moment to play.
One little sidebar issue that's related to this is, like, if you take 100 VR gamers and you ask them about the flat gaming question, to me, it seems like 70 of them are more like us, where it's like, I can't go back to those games. I'm sorry, I've been spoiled. It's like going back, it's like having color TV and going back to black and white. I just can't do it. I think that is actually the popular consensus.
I'm not not trying to cut you off, but I wanted to jump in on that point. I don't think that's true. I think if you read the PSVR and Vive subreddits, you'll find that's the case, because you have a inherently more niche audience. But I think if you go to a more neutral type place, GAF, I think, is a perfect example of that. I think you'll find it's really kind of the flip side. I think you'll find that, you know, maybe 30% are just gung-ho VR only, whereas, you know, the bulk, you know, kind of like, yeah, I get VR, it's awesome, but, you know, Horizon Zero Dawn is awesome too. Like, that's just what I see, and it's just giving my perspective, and I wanted to throw that in there before you finish your thought. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I know what you're talking about on GAF, but most of those people that have a lot of, like, negativity about VR, they don't own VR headsets, and some of these people just want VR to die in a boat fire, and they can't wait for it to be over. So I don't know that I would look at GAF as being realistic either. Yeah, I don't know. But let's just pretend that the vast majority of gamers out there don't want to go back to flat gaming, that once you've tried VR, once you've really used VR, you get spoiled, like the color TV, black and white TV scenario. You don't want to go to black and white. But the question is all these journalists at Giant Bomb, at Polygon, at IGN, at Kind of Funny, are they in a situation where, because the vast majority of their audience is not with VR yet, they almost have like imagine if Jeff Gerstmann was totally blown away by VR, and it was like, oh man, I love VR. This is all I can play. I can't play flat games anymore. That wouldn't work for their show. You know, the vast majority of their audience isn't into VR. So I kind of wonder if there might be some journalists out there that actually are really into VR, but they can't be, because if they were, 80% of their listeners, Jeff Kanata of DLC Podcast, he talks about VR and he's super enthusiastic about VR, but he gets hammered from his regular listeners that don't have the money for VR. They're playing Xbox One. They're playing PS4. They don't got the money for this VR stuff. They don't got the money for Oculus. They don't got a high-end PC. They don't want to hear any of this VR crap. They're like, man, every time I hear this VR crap, you're taking up time on my podcast. I don't want to hear this. And so I kind of wonder if some of these journalists out there, these old guard journalists, if they got as deep into VR as we are, it would be bad for their career. What do you guys say to that?
I absolutely agree. And I think as well, you know, you can see this on quite a few podcasts where, like PC Gamer podcast, you have a US version of the PC Gamer podcast and you have a UK version. And they very, very rarely, I mean, the US one more so, they mention VR a little bit more than the UK. I don't think I've probably heard about 2 minutes on the entire UK version of the PC Gamer podcast where they talk about VR. And on the US one, when I listen to that, they're almost apologetic about bringing it up. Whenever they bring it up, it's almost like they're apologizing for doing so, because they get so much backlash from people that don't want to hear about VR. They're standard PC monitor gamers, and they don't want to get involved in VR at all. So I think it definitely, absolutely plays a part in the coverage of VR, and it's doing it harm. I honestly believe that it is doing virtual reality harm at the moment, and hopefully it can get past this, and slowly the tide will change, and things, more people will become on board with it, and they'll start getting less hate when they mention VR, and hopefully that will change things. But I think it's a good point that you've got, and it's absolutely true in my opinion.
Yep. I think it's 100% true. They have to cater to their audience. It's how they get their ad revenue or whatever. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what keeps the show in production. So and I don't mind that so much, although I do think gaming journalism is playing a part in the rate of VR adoption. I think if they talked about it more, it would certainly entice people to go out and buy it more.
Exactamundo, man.
You know, so they have a responsibility here to the industry, I think. But you know, when you carve it down, or you parse things down to the individual level, each guy or gal only has to keep food on their table, and you know, they can't be troubled with the you know, the whole industry. They're not single-handedly responsible. So you got a bunch of single actors in a market that aren't responsible, but collectively are somehow, you know, somewhat responsible. So, you know, it's very interesting, and I only hope there is a flip that Gary mentioned. There's a turning point, or whatever, that drives more mainstream media discussion on it. Otherwise, you know, at the same time, the people whining and crying because they don't have the money, they somehow manage to have the money, you know, when a new console comes out. Like, you know, you'll never, or at least as far as I'm concerned, or that I see, you'll never hear, you know, the folks at IGN or whatever getting blasted, you know, for all the PS5 coverage that they're inevitably going to do when the console comes out. And that's, you know, $400 that the average Joe Walmart has to go out and drop. And they do, you know, like, you know, day one, you know, how many millions are sold. So at some point, people are just going to have to realize and say, okay, VR is a thing. It's a console, you know. It's very telling that, I don't remember if it was you or Gary that mentioned this earlier, but, you know, it's like the PS1. Well, with the PlayStation 1, they did have to convince people, and VR is very similar. They have to convince people that this is now another cycle of evolving products, like smartphones, like computers, like tablets, that you are likely going to want to insert yourself in at some point. And that's a revolving door. And you know what? Just add another device to your rotating list of crap that you buy every Christmas. VR's in there. You know, you don't cry when a new iPhone comes out. You don't cry when, you know, a new Xbox comes out. Well, okay, you got to accept that VR is going to be like that. Hopefully, I'm hoping it's going to be like that, because I want the industry to continue. And if it does, that's just one more device that you got to upgrade every so often.
Yeah, you know, the point that you made though, Steve, about like, imagine you're the type of person that isn't into VR. Imagine you're one of those people that every time Jeff Kanata brings up VR, you're like, oh God, do we have to deal with this again? Okay, let me skip 20 minutes so I can get past this VR crap. Imagine that you're one of those people and you listen to a ton of podcasts every week. And imagine that Jeff Gersman all of a sudden is saying, hey guys, I can't play flat anymore. I'm sorry, VR, I'm all in. This VR stuff has blown me away. I just can't play flat anymore. Imagine if he was talking like that. Imagine if Greg Miller was talking like that. Colin Moriarty was talking like that. The Player One guys, just all these different podcasts, the IGN guys, etc. If all these people were talking like that, the people that are listening that normally are like, man, forget this VR crap, get it out of my podcast, they would have to start thinking, oh, wait a minute here. Maybe I need to freaking try this VR stuff. If my favorite gamer of all time, Jeff Gersman or Greg Miller or whoever it is, these taste makers, if these guys are saying they can't play flat anymore, maybe I need to start maybe I need to go get a demo of this VR thing, see what this is all about. But it's such a hard thing for them to do because they do have that audience, but there is going to be a tipping point at some time. This is probably a great topic for deep dives. We started this new video thing series that we're doing, deep dives, and this is actually a great topic.
We're diving pretty deep right now. So.
That's true. Yeah, we've been spending a little too much time on it. Just the last thing I'll say is I'm going to try to get Horizon Zero Dawn this next week if I can at Redbox. I'm going to try to rent it, and I'm going to try to give a legitimate test to see, can I dive back into flat gaming? Can it wrap me up? I'm going to try my best to try that out. I don't know if I'll even be able to get it next week, but I'm going to try. So hopefully maybe next week I can comment on that. But why don't we get into a little bit of what you've been playing? I know we don't have a whole bunch to get into this week, but let's kick it over to Gary. Gary, has there been any new games or experiences that you've tried?
Yeah, there's just a couple of little experiences that I tried. I'll just spend a couple of minutes on these because there's not a lot to say on each of them. But the first one is called Nevrosa Prelude. It's like a free download for a forthcoming game that will be coming out a little bit later on this year. It's like a horror game, and I guess you'd put it in the genre of escape the room. It's like got puzzles and things like that in it. It's very, very short. I mean, it's literally, I think, probably 5 minutes in total, this is. But it seemed pretty good. It's difficult to get a good idea of how good the game is going to be because it was just so short and there wasn't a great deal to it. But what was there was good. I can recommend people download it and give that a try. It's you're doing very small menial tasks, very simple puzzles, and just working through a very short narrative 5-minute experience, and you get sort of glimpses of what the game's about through these notes which are stuck to the walls and you can read. It's like you're based in some kind of laboratory, I think, of a scientist, and you've got some notes of this scientist that reports what he was looking into. But that's worth a download. That's called Nevrosa. And the other one I quickly want to mention is called Super Punch. Now, this is a game that was made for a competition. It was for a contest, which was to create a game inspired by Superhot. You know, Super Punch is basically you're in an environment very similar to Superhot. It looks almost identical to those environments, and the enemies have tried to be sort of stylized in a similar way to Superhot. But the novelty of this is the fact that you use your punch mechanic with the Vive controllers to propel yourself through the environment. So this is a sort of a gimmicky type of locomotion. I didn't think it worked too well. I mean, it was an interesting thing to try. I don't think the locomotion really worked too well for me. It didn't feel like you were moving far enough. Maybe if you were moving a little bit quicker and a little bit further with each punch, it would have been better. But you're fighting these enemies that shoot bullets at you, and you can punch the bullets back to them and kill them. I only played this probably about 5 to 10 minutes. It's very difficult, actually. It's a lot more difficult than Superhot. So, yeah, I didn't spend too long with it. But again, that's a free download. It's not available on Steam, that one, Super Punch, but I will put a link to that in the comments below for anybody who wants to give that a try as well.
Steve, what about you? Some games you've been playing? Well, you've been in Hawaii all this time, so you haven't really been at... What did you do in Hawaii anyway, like in entertainment-wise?
Well, we went to the beach very often. We did a couple of humpback whale watching type things. I snorkeled a lot. My username in everything, PlayStation Network, subreddit or Reddit, and all that is Scuba Steve 2365. So I love to be in the ocean. Fortunately, I don't live near one, and I'm certainly not going to put myself in the Ohio River, but I love to snorkel. I love to scuba dive. So Maui is a great place, you know, because there's a lot of just beach access snorkeling. You can just walk from the sand, and within 2 minutes, you're swimming alongside a sea turtle. So I did a lot of that. That aside,
wait, but Did you have like a 3DS, or like were you playing any phone game? I mean, did you play any video games? No video games for 2 weeks?
None. I can't do flat gaming. We've been over this. um, no, I didn't play any games. So, but I did. You know, I had, you know, iPad, iPhone, and I had my computing technology with me. So I did at least keep up with the industry as much as possible. So I have this sort of philosophy, and it also applies to work, where when I'm on vacation, I typically get up before the rest of the family. And so until people wake up, I'm free to use my computer or whatever. And that's what I do. So every morning I'd get up, I'd have my cup of coffee, I'd sit out on the porch, look into the ocean, watch whales jump. And, you know, I'd get on Reddit and, you know, things like that. And, you know, I was trying within reason to keep up with the VR space because I'm legitimately interested in it. And then the wife and kids would wake up and then close the lid and, you know, we'd move on for our activities for the day. So we came back, we're recording the show here on a Sunday. I came back Friday. So I didn't play. I was really jet lagged. I firmly believe that coming from the West going east is harder than coming from the east going west in terms of jet lag, but particularly so with Maui. I've never been to Asia, but with Hawaii, it interrupts your not only your sleep cycle but your eating cycle, because normally when you're eating dinner in Hawaii, say 7-8 p.m., it is midnight or 1 a.m. here in Kentucky Eastern time. And so I've had more difficulty getting my eating back on track because I'm waking up in the middle of the night hungry, but during the day I'm like, oh, I don't want anything. So anyways, long rant. I have played some games yesterday, later last night, and some earlier today. I was able to get back into some VR games, and I fell for the hype eventually of Res Infinite. I picked this up on a whim because of the PlayStation Plus sale. It's $30 normally, and it's on sale for $20. I don't know if it's going to get any cheaper anytime soon, given that it's a 15-year-old game anyway. So, I've heard ever since, the PSVR was released that Area X, it is the awesome sauce. So, I wanted to try it out, and I figured $20 was going to be my entry point. So, first, I'm not going to really talk about Res itself. I have to assume most people have seen it. At this point, it's an older game. I never played it. I was never interested. I guess it came out on the Dreamcast, and then there was a PS2 version or something like that. I never played the original. I never played any iteration of it. So for me, I was able to experience Res for the first time. And I have to imagine this was a really good way to experience Res for the first time, because it almost seems like it was built for VR. Of course, I can't compare it to whatever original iteration it had, but it felt good in VR. To get to this infamous Area X, you have to complete the 5 levels, essentially the main game, or play for 1 hour. I beat the 5 levels and then unlocked Area X. I don't know if it took me more than an hour. It did take me more than an hour on a clock because I died or whatever, lost a few times. So the game itself is good. Like the area levels 1 through 5, particularly level 5, it really changes pace. It's something really different from the previous 4 levels. So I like the game as a standalone. But then, really I was burning through it as quick as I could, honestly, because I wanted to get to this Area X that I've heard so much about and have also remained ignorant about. I've not watched a single video or anything on Area X. And I get into Area X, and one of the things that it does differently is that with the main Res game, it's kind of on rails is the best way I guess I can describe it. You don't really control the navigation of the little guy. You're just kind of flying through these computerized, glitchy environments, and you're shooting your targets. I'm assuming they developed it with VR in mind, and it's something that was developed specifically for Res Infinite, because once you get into Area X, you can now control where the guy goes within space to a degree. It's not completely just unrestricted open locomotion. but it's very different than the first few levels. But really what sets it apart is its styling is a little bit different. It has a lot of particle type effects. Reminds me a lot of Resogun from Housemarque or Housemarque. I'm not sure how that developer's name is mentioned, but it is really good. Now, I'm not going to say that for me it lived up to the hype, because you know, when something is hyped to the nth degree, it can't really live up to it when you eventually get to try it. But at some point, I found myself saying, okay, now I'm in Area X. Let's see what all the noise is about. Let's see, you know, I kept, okay, is this what everyone's talking about? You know, at some point I quit asking myself that, and I found like, holy shit, this is really good. And I think what did it was the audio. The music is really, really good and timed with what's going on, and it feels pretty awesome. It was a great experience. I really did like Area X. I would say, you know, if the engineer in me, I have to put numbers and statistics on things, I would say, you know, it's kind of like 95% of the hype that it met for me. So it did a good job of living up to the hype. Didn't quite, you know, just completely blow my socks off, but it did a damn good job and came pretty close. And yeah, I can, like the 914,998 other PSVR owners that have said, play this, I can kind of echo that sentiment.
Hey, quick question. First, on just regular res, did you get any kind of motion sickness? Because I know when I did the demo, like most of it worked fine, but every once in a while it'd make a certain movement where I'd be like, oh, that didn't feel too good. Any motion sickness? And then the other question, after seeing Area X, do you think they can make a brand new game that is all Area X? That would be incredible. Or what do you think on those 2 points?
On the motion sickness, yes. It was very, very, very mild. It wasn't really a problem. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if it's because I hadn't played VR in 2 weeks, or a little more than 2 weeks, actually, because a day or two before we left, you know, I was busy doing other crap and didn't play much. So it's the longest I had been since getting VR without being in VR. So I wasn't sure if it was that or if it was the game. I have very briefly played another game. I also fallen for the hype. This is what being 2 weeks without your access to your VR, but continuing to read Reddit and everything does for you. You really fall for the hype. I found a really good deal on a Thrustmaster racing wheel. All the Dirt Rally VR hype, and I picked one up on Craigslist for $100. And my thought was, okay, you know what? Like, I've never been really into racing games, but I've also not tried it with a racing wheel and a VR headset. So this might be super awesome. And if not, I think I can resell this thing and probably, you know, turn a profit. If anything, at least get my $100 back. So I figured it was a no risk opportunity. So I got it very loosely set up. It's just kind of on a crappy table. You might probably see it behind me here. And but I you know, Dirt Rally VR, it's on sale for $37. The whole pack that includes the VR unlock and everything. I thought, well, maybe I could get the game from GameFly or something, but then I have to spend the 10 or 15 bucks or whatever to unlock the VR portion. I was like, you know what? I fell sucker. I was just kind of on a whim buying crap, and so I bought Dirt Rally VR, but I haven't had a chance to play it yet because it's like a 40 gig download, and I have good speeds, you know, here at home, but it wasn't fast enough. So I did try it out with the Driveclub demo. So you know, that one, you get the one race and the one time trial, and that I was experiencing some sickness there. But you know, and I think you mentioned this, Anthony, on one of the shows while I was gone. When you wreck, like it's something about wrecking and spinning out and losing control. Like, it just kind of sent me in a little bit of a whirly fits, and I'm holding on to this little wheel, and I'm like, you know, between it and Res, I was experiencing very mild motion sickness, but it wasn't real bad. It wasn't anything. And I honestly, until you had mentioned that there were some people had issues with Res, I just attributed it to the fact that I hadn't played in 2 weeks. Oh, and you had asked about Area X. Yes, they could do a whole game with this engine, for lack of a better word, without issue. And now, my guess is they're probably planning to. I don't know why they wouldn't.
Hey, Steve, can I ask you, because you've never really said much about Driveclub. We both have had PlayStation VRs for, since they came out. And the Driveclub demo was there. When you first got your PlayStation VR, did you try the Driveclub demo? What was your thought?
I did the race, and I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I was really put off by the graphics, and I'm probably going to have to put my money where my mouth is on Here They Lie, because I said the same thing. Like, Here They Lie, I think, is a game that I thought I would like leading into the PS VR launch, but then I tried the demo, and it just looks so like I don't need graphics to be awesome, but they have to like not make me sick. Like if they're too bad, where it's actually a functional problem, and that's what I had with Here They Lie, and also had it with Driveclub. I think they tried to carry over too many assets from the main Driveclub game, and they were just asking too much out of the PlayStation 4 hardware to really run it the way we want. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, because just speaking of driving games, really, I just wanted to mention the fact that Assetto Corsa it now looks like the developers of that game are going to be bringing that over to the Vive natively, because you can run that through Revive at the moment, Assetto Corsas, and that's a really good game because it's not too demanding on the hardware, and you can super sample that right up, and that is one racing game that I can honestly say looks absolutely fantastic in VR.
So that's one of the reasons, and I hope I don't get burned by this. It's one of the reasons why I bought the Thrustmaster that I bought was the T150. I think its retail is $200. There's been a sale recently on Micro Center. I don't have any where I live for like 140, and that's one reason why I think I got it for $100 on Craigslist. I told the guy, I was like, man, I can buy one for $140. He was asking 125. I was like, I need more of a discount if I'm going to buy this. And he goes, well, how about it's $100? And I said, sure. So my point, though, is the T150, when I quickly researched this aspect, says that it was compatible with the PC as well. So as one of my main interests was that I could try this on PS4 and then also try some Vive games. So I'm hoping to eventually, try some of this stuff out. But my next thing I'm going to do is try Dirt Rally VR, which I'm told, I remember reading that it looked a little better than Driveclub, so I'm hoping that makes it better. But the Driveclub demo was far more enjoyable with a racing wheel, and I only did the time trial, a few laps on the time trial, and I did a race one time. And I let my wife check it out. She had a lot of fun with it. She's like, "Ooh, a racing wheel, that looks fun." She doesn't really play these games that much, but this interested her enough where she played Driveclub for probably about 20 minutes.
If you still have your GameFly subscription, I highly recommend trying the full version of Driveclub, because I think trying the full version, like I have the full version of Driveclub right now. I have it through GameFly, and yeah, I've already said it. The graphics are terrible, but you start driving around these certain tracks, and you're driving next to a river or you're driving next to a lake, and it is pixelated to the 12th degree. But there's something about just you're driving along, and in the corner of your eye, you see this lake over there, and you kind of see it over here, and you're going over a bridge, and then adding the wheel to it. What I've always wondered about with wheels and with VR is that, okay, so you're in the VR headset, you see this wheel right here, it's moving around, but then the wheel that you're holding in real life, if like it's 3 inches farther this way or 3 inches closer this way, or you're moving it and the hands that are in the VR world are not matching up with for some reason, I think like that would really screw me up. But everybody I ask about it is like, no, that's not a big deal.
No, I honestly, I don't even notice it. Now, one of I guess the bad sides about this T150 that I bought is that the wheel is a little bit smaller than, I guess, the higher end versions, both from Thrustmaster and Logitech. But also a lot of race cars have, a little bit smaller wheels, I do believe. It's not your standard kind of, pedestrian vehicle steering wheel size. So it does do that one-to-one tracking, but in the very brief time that I had with it, and we could talk about it more on the next show because I hope to spend a lot more time between now and then on it. It felt like, you know, as I turned this way, like it mapped pretty good, enough that I didn't notice any sort of disconnect. Now, I won't say that it mapped perfectly or anything like that, but it felt natural. Like there were no disconnects or no concerns or no like, you know, I guess it feels that much better than a controller. Like you're greatly, you know, improving the experience. But I didn't notice what you said. And now I almost hope, I'm concerned now that you pointed it out to me, I'm going to notice it. So I'll make sure I give you hell for it if that's the case.
What about like rumble? Do you feel the rumble?
Oh yeah, like the I guess there's a cheaper one, like a T80 or something, but I guess the higher end ones, they how they're driven, how the steering wheel, you know, it connects to a like a stepper motor or small servo motor or something, in the way the gearbox, you know, I don't know what the gear assembly is made of, but you know, belts and pulleys and things like that, that's one of the reasons why the more expensive ones are more expensive. But with the one that I have, it puts force on it. So like if you're going around a turn, like it gives you some natural resistance, and it vibrates, and you know, it does a lot. It's a lot more active and more like an arcade machine than I thought it would be. It's pretty impressive how much kind of power is in this small little box that clamps to whatever.
I think, hey, does that wheel, Gary, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but does that wheel have, because I know some wheels have like 900-degree steering, you know, where you have to turn like that, or is it?
Well, I think, so when you first hit power, the wheel will spin by itself. It'll spin all the way in one direction and then come back the opposite direction. I think it's sort of homing itself. It's finding dead center or whatever. But once it does that, I guess however it works, it is mapped. So when I did the turns, like I would only, you know, there wasn't a lot of, you know, like you're in an old Buick trying to do a U-turn. Like it was like most of the turns are, you know, within that kind of, for the audio listeners, I'm making a steering motion like a goofball. But you're never really making complete, you know, like you picture grandpa with his palm on the wheel doing like 5 turns. It's not like that, you know. It's really, the games I think are designed so that you don't, you know, and that may be, you know, I've never driven a race car. I've ridden in one. I've ridden in a NASCAR before, but I've never driven one. And I'm guessing, you know, due to racing, they don't have to make, you know, a lot of turns to do what they need. It's more precise movements.
I think that steering wheel that you've got, Steve, is the same one that I've got as well. And this is another point. I think the more expensive steering wheels, they have more degrees of turning as well. But you can set this up in the game. At least you can on PC games. I don't know if it's the same on PlayStation 4, but you can set up the degrees of turning that your wheel has, and the game will map it to that. So when you were talking about how if it matches your sort of real life hands, you can get it in most of the games. Like I've played Project Cars and Assetto Corsa and also Dirt Rally. Actually, you can get it so it maps pretty closely to your own hands in real life. It's not one-to-one, and it's not sort of, you're right, when the steering wheel is maybe slightly close to you or slightly further away than it appears in the game. In all honesty, it doesn't make any difference. You sort of get past that very quickly. It's not as big an impact as you might think it would be.
What about the stick shift? Do you have a stick shift with it?
No, this one can get the optional stick shift, but the stick shift itself retails for like $150, I think. I will have to get very, very into these racing games before I consider that. And if I do, I think the next thing I would do is buy one of the collapsible stands. I think those may you know, because right now I have it clamped to this cheap Walmart, you know, side table that we break out for holidays and stuff. So I think if I really get into this, then that would be the next thing I buy before I do the stick shift. Now it does have a paddle shifter. So I'm assuming, I haven't done it yet, but I'm assuming you can still play a manual transmission configuration and do paddle shifting, which I guess, you know, it doesn't have a clutch pedal. So that's probably something else I'd have to upgrade. If I wanted to get into the stick shift, I'd probably have to get one of the pedal assemblies that include the third pedal for the clutch. So I don't know. My wife is going to have issues if I get that much into it, but we'll see where it takes me. For now, I spent $100. I think it was a low risk kind of trial for me. If this thing starts collecting dust in 2 weeks, I'm gonna throw it up on Craigslist, and you know, I'll say I've been there, done that. If I love it, then we'll see where it goes. But as of now, I don't have interest in expanding it much further.
Yeah, it's always funny with those things where it's like, how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Are you going to go get yourself one of those car seats and the whole deal? I mean, some people just go like, that's the thing about immersion is like, once you start feeling some of this immersion, then you're like, well, if I do this, I'll feel 10% more immersion. And then if I do that, it'll be another 10% more immersion. If I do that, now I'm buying a D-Box motion simulator for $3,000, you know?
This is like what we were talking about last week, though, with the hydraulic chairs. That's like the ultimate thing where you can get these chairs that are on hydraulics. Let me know if you get one of those, Steve.
Yeah, no, I don't see that happening.
Alrighty, well, let's see. I don't really have anything to talk about this week. I've been super busy. I played a little bit of Battlezone, a little bit of Driveclub, but I don't really have anything to say about it. Did you guys have any other games you wanted to get into?
No.
Okay. One other thing I will mention, though, is to our audience out there is we are doing this new video series called Deep Dives. And what we're doing is exploring certain topics, certain issues in the world of VR gaming and trying to like dive deeper into it and kind of get a little bit more involved into it. And I put up a video a few days back where I'm talking about PSVR tracking. Houston, do we have a problem? And basically, I'm just kind of talking about PSVR tracking, the motion controllers. Does Sony need to do a mid-cycle change? And so we have that one up there that you can check out. And then Gary also did one just talking about it, about has VR killed monitor gaming, basically. And so we are going to have some of these special features. So if you guys don't often check out the YouTube channel, you might want to check that out because we will not have audio only versions of these. So you will have to go to the YouTube channel to check that out. We're also doing some new Let's Plays. I know I put up Climby and Harmonix Music VR. Gary, any other Let's Plays you've done recently?
I put one up of Emma Holt. We spoke about it last week. Just a short prologue of a game that's coming out soon. So that one's up there that you can check out.
Okay. Oh, I also just did a Let's Play of the original old school Doom in VR, and this is running on the mod GZ3 Doom. It's actually, I think it was made for the Oculus DK1 originally, and you have to use Revive to be able to run it on the Vive. But it's kind of cool. You might want to check it out because I'm playing straight up old school Doom in VR, and I'm standing up, getting that full immersion. And so you can check that out as well. Of course, Steve has been gone for 2 weeks, so he doesn't have a lot of Let's Plays, but I'm sure he'll start kicking those in pretty soon too. But let's see, is there anything else we need to bring up, or does that pretty much do it?
I'm going to add, I created a Facebook page for VR Roundtable. There's going to be no new content or anything there. It's just going to kind of mirror our basically our Twitter feed. They're synchronized. So if for whatever reasons you're a listener and work blocks Twitter but not Facebook, or you just prefer Facebook, you can follow us there and get all of the YouTube links and things like that for when we got a new video up.
Yeah, and also just you can email us at vrroundtable@gmail.com, and just email us any questions you've got or anything. If you've got any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, that'd be great to hear from you as well.
Yeah, we could also use some suggestions for future deep dives as well. So if you have a certain topic that you think, man, I really wish they do a deep dive on this subject, go ahead and email us that, because we are looking for different topics to discuss on that as well. So basically, that's going to do it for episode 24 of VR Roundtable, and we'll see you guys next week. Take it easy. Later.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Bye.